Homeland Security Subcommittee on Emergency Management and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the subcommittee may recess at any point. The purpose of this hearing is to hear from state and local law enforcement partners on the evolving threat landscape post 9/11. I thank the 9/11 Memorial and Museum for hosting us as we remember the tragedy that affected so many lives and changed our understanding of the threat landscape here in the United States of America and beyond. Without objection, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro, and the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maliotakis, are permitted to sit on the dais and ask questions to the witnesses. I would also like to seek unanimous consent and have Mr. Menendez also wave on to the committee. Without objection, so ordered, I recognize myself for an opening statement. I first want to thank our witnesses for participating in today's field hearing on evolving threats, security and safety in a post-9/11 world. I am humbled to be able to conduct this hearing on such sacred ground. As a lifelong New Yorker, retired NYPD detective, former chief of the Island Park Fire Department, and chairman of the Homeland Security Subcommittee on Emergency Management and Technology, I want to thank each and every one of you for your commitment to keeping our nation, our state, our city, and of course our beloved Nassau County safe. Without you, we would be in a very different place. It is my firm belief that those serving in law enforcement, the fire service, and emergency management represent the very best of America. Our nation remains resilient thanks to your bravery and the bravery of your colleagues, their tenacity and their ability to bring order into chaos. They choose to overcome fear with courage every day, which they nobly demonstrated 22 years ago as they helped our nation respond to and recover from the deadliest attack the United States has ever seen. The terrorist attacks of September 11th, 2001 shook this great nation and took the lives of almost 3,000 innocent people, lives that were taken far too soon. Our sense of safety and security was shattered, highlighting the presence of very real and a very cruel enemy. And while the tragic fall of those great towers will never be erased from our memory, we also cannot forget the unparalleled heroism and determination demonstrated by first responders and law enforcement that day. As former President George W. Bush declared in his address later that evening, we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Amid such pain and chaos, New York City's firefighters, police officers, paramedics ran towards the collapsing buildings with unforgettable courage and compassion. The world may look different than it did 22 years ago, but there is no shortage of those who seek to do harm and disrupt our way of life. From our nation's first responders to those of us serving in Congress, we each have a role to play in keeping our communities safe and protecting our right to life, liberty, and our pursuit of happiness. Following the attacks of September 11th, Congress demonstrated its commitment to national security by reforming intergovernmental coordination and terrorism prevention by creating the Department of Homeland Security. Within DHS, the Federal Emergency Management Agency's grant programs provides preparedness funding for states, local governments, and nonprofit agencies to prevent and respond to terrorist attacks, major disasters, and other emergencies. DHS Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency leads our nation's efforts to defend against cyber threat actors that target critical infrastructure, federal, state, and local governments, the private sector, and every single individual that calls America home. The Department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis delivers intelligence information to our state, local, tribal, and territorial and private sector partners. DHS's Countering Terror Weapons of Mass Destruction Office was established to help its operational partners at the federal, state, and local level to prevent the use of weapons of mass destruction against the United States of America and promote readiness for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. Regardless of one's position, as public servants, we must follow the example of those heroes who sacrificed their lives that day and use the authority and resources we've each been given to put the lives of our fellow Americans first. We must be vigilant in confronting new threats as well as innovative as those threats evolve. The United States Armed Forces, law enforcement, and the intelligence community has bravely fought terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, ISIS, and many others. But their radical ideologies continue to inspire violence against the West. In fact, the FBI has expressed concern about U.S.-based lone actors radicalized by jihadism and other radical ideologies. Additionally, other threats include transnational criminal organizations, which have trafficked fentanyl into the United States of America, causing more than 100,000 deaths annually. Cyber attacks and espionage also threaten our nation's hospitals, small businesses, and critical infrastructure. Furthermore, anti-Semitism and hate crimes have skyrocketed in the last 2 years. There is no doubt the evil we face is ever evolving. And although daunting, we must meet today's challenges with the same commitment to protecting those we love as those heroes who responded to the attacks on 9/11 and the brave soldiers who fought on the front lines in Afghanistan. We must be unwavering in our support of the federal and local law enforcement agencies as they intercept and disrupt terrorist plots against this great nation. And we must support our nation's network of emergency responders as they safeguard our home from unimaginable threats. As we look to the future, let us remember those who gave their lives on September 11th, 2001, and who have courageously fought to protect our freedoms. Freedom isn't free, so let us be united in our resolve to protect our businesses, our places of worship, and our way of life, all which are beacons of light in the greatest nation in the world. Thank you again to our witnesses for your commitment to peace and security. I look forward to hearing from you about your work. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Goldman, for his opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for convening this hearing in this now hallowed place, the Museum and Memorial for 9/11. I also just want to take note of my colleagues who are here as well, many from New York City and the surrounding suburbs, including New Jersey suburbs, all of whose districts have been were dramatically impacted by the 9/11 attacks. And of course, I am the representative of this district, this location, and I'm very grateful that although we have very many disagreements on a number of different things, we have bipartisan unity in supporting this site, this museum, the 9/11 World Trade Center health program, to make sure that we honor our commitment to the first responders and simply pay for their health care from their illnesses that have arisen from their heroic efforts following 9/11. I also want to thank our witnesses who are here today. We appreciate all of your work responding to and preventing terrorist attacks, and are very grateful for your presence here today. I think the American people do not realize how many potential terrorist attacks are thwarted by the fine men and women in law enforcement. You don't hear about those for good reason, but I know from my former years as a federal prosecutor that they happen far more frequently than you would realize. First, Deputy Commissioner Pfeiffer, I also just want to take a special moment to extend thank you for your service. You are a hero and among the brave first responders who responded after those horrific attacks and have continued your fine service to our country. I'd also like to thank the Memorial and the Museum for hosting us today, for providing the space. I've been to the museum several times. It is incredibly powerful and moving, and it is a testament to the importance of that event that we honored yesterday on the 22nd anniversary, which we will do every year as a reminder that we can never forget what happened on 9/11. We can never forget those people around the world, those groups, those organizations who do not like us because we are, as the chairman said, the beacon of light of democracy. That day is etched into our collective memory as a day that brought this nation to a standstill, a day that showed the world the worst of humanity's capacity for hatred, but also the best of our resilience and unity as a city and as a nation. And on that fateful Tuesday morning, beautiful skies, as we all remember and is commemorated in this museum, 19 terrorists hijacked 4 commercial planes, flew 2 of them into the 2 towers of the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon, and a 4th plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, through the heroic efforts of passengers to thwart what was expected to be an attack on our capital. Nearly 3,000 people were killed that day, and I vividly remember I lived about a mile north of here on Hudson Street, and I will never forget watching streams of people covered in soot, dust. It looked like they had literally been showered on by a white soot, walking startled, silent up the street. I will never forget the pile burning for weeks and weeks, the smell that just constantly emanated from it, the missing person signs that were put up all around downtown. None of them were ever recovered. It is a day etched in many of our memories because I know many of us here have stories to tell, and it's a day that we can never forget. I'd also like to acknowledge the survivors and families of those who lost loved ones on 9/11 and who have continued to fight every single day for the truth, justice, and care that the New York heroes so deeply deserve. And those who are still suffering from illnesses, it is troubling, to say the least, that there were 343 members of the Fire Department of New York who perished that day. And since 9/11, there are now 341 who have died from 9/11 related illnesses. Those families, those survivors, need full transparency from the City of New York and from our government to make sure that they get the proper justice, accountability, and transparency that they need. In the days and weeks following 9/11, the world watched as we came together in a display of unity and strength. And the world joined us, joined America, our allies, to share in both the grief but also the resiliency. We have transformed this area now. We have rebuilt it, as is the American way. And the strength of our resiliency is a reminder of the mandate that we have to ensure that evil never triumphs over the American spirit, that our democracy and freedoms never succumb to those who want to undermine it, both from abroad and from within. The aftermath of 9/11 reshaped how our country had dealt with terrorism and ushered in a need to strengthen our nation's national security to ensure that such events never happen again. We have enacted new laws establishing the 9/11 Commission, 22 agencies that joined together to become the Department of Homeland Security, in what was the largest reorganization of the federal government since World War II. And as we remember 9/11, we must also reflect on the lessons it imparts, which is the need to continually strengthen our homeland against terrorist attacks. 9/11 revealed significant and fundamental security challenges. For example, emergency communications challenges were identified by the 9/11 Commission as a contributing factor in the death toll. There have been vast improvements in the last 22 years, including the creation of the First Responder Network Authority in 2012, which established a single nationwide broadband specifically for first responders, broadband network. And I hope to hear today from our witnesses how advancements in technology and communications have helped to improve the city's security as well as the nation's security. Another great resource that was developed after 9/11 were the Department of Homeland Security's grant programs, which provided dedicated funding to cities like New York to help build and strengthen defenses against terrorism. We have programs now like the Urban Area Security Initiative and the State Homeland Security Grant Program to assist in ensuring that first responders have the resources they need to defend their communities. So many cities, including New York and Washington, rely on these resources. And I know my colleagues here commit to doing everything we can to ensure that these resources remain sufficient and robust to stem any future terrorist attacks. It is my hope that we use this hearing to commemorate the memory of the victims and the bravery of the first responders. This is my home. It is an honor to be here for this hearing to discuss how we are going to keep our city, New York, strong. So let us recommit to working together, transcending our differences, and striving for a world where tragedies become relics of the past, and we work together to promote American democracy here and abroad. And I look forward to discussing all of this with our witnesses today. I thank the chairman again, and I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Other members of the subcommittee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. I am very pleased to have such an important panel of witnesses before us today. I ask that the witnesses please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before the Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I would now like to formally introduce our witnesses. Mr. Joseph Pfeiffer is the first Deputy Commissioner of the New York City Fire Department. Mr. Pfeiffer was the first fire chief to respond to the World Trade Center attacks on September 11th, and we certainly thank him for his bravery and heroism on that day and for being here with us today. Mr. Pfeiffer is also the founding director of the FDNY's Center for Terrorism and Disaster Preparedness. Sir, thank you very much for your service. Ms. Laura Kavanaugh is the 34th Fire Commissioner for the City of New York Fire Department. Commissioner Kavanaugh oversees administration of the agency's 17,000 employees and was a key leader for the department's responses to the 2015 Ebola outbreak, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. Commissioner, thank you for your time and your commitment to safety. Ms. Rebecca Weiner heads the New York City Police Department's Intelligence and Counterterrorism Bureau. Deputy Commissioner Weiner has been with the NYPD since 2006 and previously served as legal counsel to the department's Intelligence Analysis Unit. She also served as the first representative of local law enforcement on the Director of National Intelligence's National Intelligence Council. Commissioner, thank you for being here. Thank you for welcoming us to 1PP earlier this month, and thank you for serving the NYPD well. Mr. Patrick Ryder is the Commissioner of the Nassau County Police Department. Commissioner Ryder has dedicated 38 years of his life to law enforcement, first starting in the NYPD in Brooklyn North, the best borough to work in. 36 of those years were with the Nassau County Police Department. Throughout his career with the Nassau County Police Department, Commissioner Ryder has implemented several programs and initiatives to ensure officer and public safety, including the creation of the Counterterrorism Unit. I will say, as a lifelong resident of Nassau County and proud to represent now in Congress, I thank Commissioner Ryder every day for his commitment to keeping Nassau County safe. Commissioner, thank you for being here. Mr. Greg Erie is the Chief Security Officer of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. He served in the United States Air Force and is a veteran of Desert Storm and gave an impressive 22 years of service to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Sir, thank you for being here, thank you for your time, and thank you for your service to this great country. I thank the witnesses for being here today, and as a proud New Yorker, thank all of you for your service to the great state of New York. I now recognize First Deputy Commissioner Pfeiffer for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman D'Esposito, Ranking Member Goldman, and subcommittee members, thank you for letting me speak today and testify in this historical location on such an important topic. 22 years ago yesterday, on a bright summer day, I was a battalion chief standing in the street with my fire units responding to an odor of gas when suddenly I heard a loud noise of a plane coming overhead and flying so low that I could read the words American on the fuselage. Then I saw the plane aim and crash into the World Trade Center. In a flash, I knew this was no accident, but a terrorist attack, and thousands of people were in their greatest moment of need. I was the first fire chief to arrive at the World Trade Center, and with my firefighters and first responders, we looked at the burning building and knew we were going to the most dangerous fire of our lives. Without hesitation, firefighters approached me and asked, "Chief, what do you need?" And I directed them, "Go up, evacuate everybody, and rescue those that couldn't get out." 17 minutes after the first attack, a second plane crashed into the South Tower, and within 60 minutes, a third plane would crash into the Pentagon and a fourth into the fields in Pennsylvania. Then the unthinkable happened. I heard a loud rumbling sound of the 110-story World Trade Center towers collapsing to the ground. And in bunker gear, you don't run too far or too fast in 11 seconds. And then this beautiful summer day turned completely dark in a cloud of crumbled concrete and twisted steel. And I couldn't see the hand in front of my face. And I wondered in that moment if I was still alive. In 102 minutes, our world changed forever as we witnessed the mass murder of nearly 3,000 people, including 343 of my firefighters, one of whom was my brother. In the aftermath, the 9/11 Commission report identified several critical changes that municipalities to improve intergovernmental, interagency communications and coordination. The fire department embraced that mandate to adapt to the threat of terrorism by enhancing emergency response capabilities. We conducted an in-depth after-action review and strategized ways to make improvements. We created a state-of-the-art fire department operations center located at FDNY headquarters. It enables senior leaders to manage complex emergencies by seamlessly sharing information and coordinating with local partners like the New York City Police Department, the New York City Emergency Management, and other city agencies, as well as state and federal partners. One significant development from our post-9/11 discussions is FDNY's creating a Center for Terrorism and Disaster Preparedness. Through information gathering, intelligence analysis, and coordination with government partners, the center enabled the department to understand the risk better and prepare to respond to terrorist attacks, natural disasters, and extreme events. Members of the center created emergency response plans, developed strategies to prepare for emerging threats. This includes working with NYPD, emergency management, to establish operational roles and train for terrorist attacks and other complex events. We have worked diligently to strengthen the interagency relationships via training with other agencies. We have bolstered communication, enabling us to share voice, video, and data to effectively manage situational awareness and coordination. This includes frequently engaging with state and federal partners, such as the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, surrounding counties, the United States Coast Guard, the National Guard, the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force, the Federal Aviation Administration, to just name a few. Another lesson from 9/11 was the fire department needed to increase capability and capacity. A good example of this was FDNY's Marine units for water operations. Before 9/11, our Marine Division was comprised primarily of 60-year-old fireboats designed to respond to boat and pier fires along the waterway. We now have built marine operations into a robust fleet of boats on various sizes and capabilities designed for a tiered response to all types of emergencies. We acquired 2 140-foot vessels, 2 medium-sized 60-foot vessels with more maneuverability, and a variety of small boats capable of responding to emergencies. We built our new fireboats to deal with terrorist threats against critical infrastructures, such as bridges, and to be a regional asset. I'm sure you remember the miracle in the Hudson, with passengers standing on the wings of United Airways, U.S. Airways, floating down the Hudson River. Our fireboats rescued many of those passengers. We also built the capabilities to repair those boats more quickly. Thankfully, no subsequent terrorist attacks in New York City has created such destruction as we saw on 9/11 of the World Trade Center. However, as this subcommittee is well aware of, the city continues to experience acts of terrorism and mass violence. In recent years, the fire department and our partners have responded to multiple terrorist attacks. This has included individuals attempting to detonate a pipe bomb in a narrow subway corridor, a bomb fashioned from a pressure cooker set to explode in a suitcase in Chelsea's neighborhood of the Lower Manhattan, and terrorists who drove a truck down the West Side Highway and crowded bike path and hit people and pedestrians and hit a school bus. Last year, the city experienced a mass shooting in the subway in Brooklyn involving a smoke grenade and handguns that injured 29 people. Since 9/11, FDNY training has evolved, including focusing on responding to active shooter incidents. Using federal fundings, we've created a counterterrorism rescue task force, selecting EMS and fire personnel, undergoing extensive training with our colleagues from NYPD. In an active shooter response, police aggressively subdue the shooter while another police team creates a warm zone in which EMS and firefighters provide life-saving care to victims under NYPD force protection. Patients needing care are then rushed to the hospitals. We call this dual mission stopping the killing and stopping the dying. The threat environment is changing as terrorism evolved and new methods of attack. We analyzed innovative threats and prepared to counter them with our security partners through an information sharing network. FDNY's Center for Terrorism and Disaster Preparedness has written intel documents and trained with members to confront the threat of vertical terrorism in high-rise buildings where fire and smoke are used as weapons. Potential innovative attacks may also involve targeting large energy storage battery systems. We are working with the private sector to safeguard these facilities. We have also taken proactive approaches involving cyber threats. To do so, we have leveraged Homeland Security funding to build a variety of in-house resources and tools for security testing, firewalls, intrusion detection, and prevention. We have also explored ways to conduct incident management of a cyber attack with physical consequences. Finally, we do not limit our preparation to responding to threats brought about by deliberate acts of terrorism. As an integral part of Homeland Security that fire departments such as the FDNY must confront is one of climate security. National disasters have devastating effects here in New York City and around the world. Recent history has shown more frequent and more powerful events. During Hurricane Sandy, the fire department faced many emergencies across the city. We responded to water rescues, flooding where people were trapped, and thousands of downed trees and utility lines and scattered debris, along with various medical emergencies, and the largest residential fire in FDNY's history. As luck would have it, I was the first chief at that fire. We have seen recent examples of climate-driven disasters causing widespread destruction, such as the wildfires in Maui, flooding in New England, and similar events in locations throughout the country. Municipalities need your help to prepare for these events, to reduce the death toll and the skyrocketing property costs. Climate security is an essential element of Homeland Security that we are incorporating into our preparedness. In conclusion, I want to thank the committee for your time and interest in these critical issues. We are here at the 9/11 Memorial Museum as a sign of resilience, to reflect on the past and envision the future so we can enhance the present. Tragic events can be challenging to talk about, but with these stories comes a responsibility to improve response operations to save lives. I am grateful to congressional members here today and your colleagues for ensuring that these discussions continue and for providing the department like FDNY with the tools to do our best in these dangerous situations. Through your support, we will turn traumatic memories into hope and greater national preparedness and security. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. I just want to remind your opening statements will be submitted for the record. If we could try to just summarize the opening statements, keep it to 5 minutes. Again, Mr. Pfeiffer, thank you so much for your service. I now recognize Commissioner Kavanaugh for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I think as you heard from Commissioner Pfeiffer's testimony, the New York City Fire Department suffered the ultimate tragedy 22 years ago, but is It's the ultimate sign of resilience, including Commissioner Pfeiffer's decision to come back and continue serving like so many of our members have. One way that we can honor those who have fallen is to protect and nourish those who've survived. Many of our members are suffering World Trade Center health conditions, as the chairman mentioned today. And for our responders who now suffer from cancer, our data shows that those receiving treatment through the World Trade Center Health Program live longer than cancer patients in New York State who were never exposed to the World Trade Center. Remarkably, 5 years after a cancer diagnosis, 86% of responders are still with us today. Despite its success, we were forced to continually fight to maintain funding for this program. In July, the Senate approved necessary funding for the World Trade Center Health Program as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. We are hopeful that the House will approve it as well. As First Deputy Commissioner Pfeiffer poignantly highlighted, one quality that has always strengthened the fire department is our ability to learn from experience and improve, and our ability to have federal funds is integral to continuing that improvement. A couple of things that I'd like to highlight on that. We are the premier fire department in the country. That means that we are a regional and a national asset. We are proud that our fellow first responders from across the continent look to us for innovation. We gladly share our knowledge and best practices. For example, recently we received requests from various municipalities about our advanced drone and robotics program. Using federal dollars, we have gone from a single tethered drone to a fleet of drones and robotic devices that we regularly use at the scene of emergency operations. We were the first fire department in the country to use a drone. We've continued pushing the technology forward, working directly with the FAA to improve processes for departments like ours. Initially, drones were just static observational devices, but we now employ these drones and robotic devices as tactical tools that save lives of first responders. For example, in April, we deployed our robotic dog to search for signs of life in a parking garage collapse. And this summer, we used the drones to analyze a construction crane that had caught fire and dangled 45 stories above 10th Avenue. We also use these regularly at fires and emergencies on a daily basis. We have also transformed into a regional and national asset. That includes a 285-member incident management team that manages and coordinates emergencies across the country. This concept, which came out of the wake of 9/11, allows the department to send talented emergency managers nationally and even internationally to provide assistance. Some examples just this year: the Ridge Creek Forest Fire in Oregon, the wildfires in Quebec in Canada. We also formed the FDNY's Urban Search and Rescue Team, which is specialized teams that are trained to carry out life-saving operations in complex environments. They have been deployed to New England to assist in search and rescue operations during severe flooding. They have also gone to Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina, and to help with hurricane responses across the country. We frequently deploy search and rescue teams, including in recent years, to Louisiana, Georgia, Florida, the Carolinas, Puerto Rico, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Texas, as well as several islands in the Caribbean. Finally, we are grateful for every dollar of federal funding that we receive, and we appreciate the attention paid to this issue by members of the subcommittee and the Committee on Homeland Security. We believe it is critical to allow grant funds to be used for training as well for management and administrative costs. There is great value in purchasing tangible, innovative equipment, and we do a lot of that. But as a grant recipient, we also put a priority on making sure that we track and administer grant dollars appropriately and efficiently. We go to great lengths to be good stewards of federal funds. Having the equipment is only one part of the equation. The other is being certain that FDNY personnel can expertly deploy it at the appropriate moment. That is only possible when their training is current and substantial. I also want to stress the importance of keeping funding tied to risk. The number of cities eligible for UASI funding has grown, and while I would never discourage the government from allocating funds to other cities, it is important that areas of the country where the risk is greatest are able to access federal funding to successfully manage that risk. Cities like New York have a great need for Homeland Security funding, as I hope First Deputy Commissioner Pfeiffer and I have demonstrated today. We greatly appreciate the partners that we have in this room. Your support and the support of your colleagues in Congress has enabled the department to modernize, innovate, and equip ourselves to keep pace with the evolving set of challenges that we face. Sometimes those innovations are the result of very difficult days, but I am grateful to live in a country that works together to ensure that an attack like 9/11 can never happen again. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I now recognize Deputy Commissioner Weiner for her opening statement.
Good morning, and thank you all. Good morning. Thank you so much to
Good morning.
Chairman D'Esposito and Ranking Member Goldman and all of you here today. On behalf of Police Commissioner Edward A. Caban and Mayor Eric Adams, I want to thank you for having me today. 22 years ago, the attacks that we have all been discussing happened in this hallowed space. A lot has happened since, and our terrorism landscape manifests very differently today. However, the threat is no less proximate, and it is no less concerning, and it requires our collaboration absolutely intensively. Today's threat environment in New York City is more dynamic, more diffuse, and unpredictable than ever. What hasn't changed, however, is that the city remains a singularly priority target due to its unique draw of iconic locations, high-profile events, and a vibrantly diverse population. Since 9/11, violent extremists and malicious actors across the ideological spectrum have targeted New York City in over 50 disrupted plots and attacks, and Commissioner Pfeiffer mentioned a couple of them earlier. From foreign terrorist organizations and the individuals they inspire, to adversarial nation states, to domestic violent extremists and lone actors motivated by a wide range of grievances, including racial and ethnic hate, anti-government extremism, and conspiracy theories. In 2022 alone, there were 8 terroristic incidents in the greater New York area, which demonstrate the diversity and the range of threats we encounter. I'll touch on some of these briefly in the interest of time, but they're enumerated at greater length in my written submission for the record. The year began with 2 incidents motivated in part by race-based conspiracy theory, the assassination of 2 of our officers in January of 2022, and, as was mentioned, a mass shooting on the subway in Brooklyn. During that summer, 2 incidents took place within weeks of one another, with links to the government of Iran and the ideology that the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Quds Force inspires, an assassination plot against a Brooklyn-based women's rights activist, and a brutal attack against author Salman Rushdie upstate. There was, of course, the horrific attack targeting the Black community in Buffalo, carried out by a racially and ethnically motivated violent extremist, and a disrupted plot against a New York City synagogue last fall by an adherent to a neo-Nazi ideology. The year ended with a jihadist attack against 3 of our officers just outside the security perimeter in Times Square as revelers were gathered to support the new year. Compounding these issues are public safety risks that are newer to us. In particular, I wanted to flag those associated with emerging technology, artificial intelligence, generative AI. Generative AI offers clear and present risks, the proliferation of disinformation and deepfakes at scale and at cost, bot-generated and voice-cloned threats, scams, and swatting campaigns, lower barriers to entry for the creation of malware, phishing, and other cyber threat vectors, the provision of targeting and tactical guidance, which we've started to see online, and even the potential creation of novel illicit narcotics, explosive compounds, or bioweapons. We're only just beginning as a law enforcement collective to understand the public safety implications of emerging technology, and generative AI is only one dimension of the challenge. It's important to note that we can't keep New Yorkers safe without critical partnerships with the federal government, and this occurs at every level with every agency. We participate in numerous task forces with federal agencies, from the Joint Terrorism Task Force to the Counterintelligence Task Force to fusion centers. Every day, we gather federal, state, and local counterparts to focus our resources on drivers of gun violence in this city through our Gun Violence Strategies Partnership. And while these active partnerships are critical, funding our local counterterrorism efforts is equally important, particularly given competing priorities that have begun to stretch the resources of many agencies today. The NYPD expects to receive $123 million in Homeland Security grants from the federal government during fiscal year 2023, vitally important funds. These funds are integral to our public safety mission and should be allocated based on risk. New York City remains the priority target in this country. We use these resources to provide equipment and training to our counterterrorism officers deployed around the city and to support our critical response command, a specially trained and equipped group of officers who you probably saw upstairs as you were walking in, who deploy throughout the city based on intelligence, protecting people, infrastructure, and events, deterring and detecting acts of terrorism and targeted violence. We rely on this funding to acquire chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear explosive detection equipment that we use around the city, and to support our intelligence analysis efforts to detect and deter threats. We depend on it to maintain our domain awareness system, an important intelligence sharing tool. Cuts to these vital funding streams will imperil these programs at a time that many of our partners are struggling with competing challenges, priority challenges as well, outside of the counterterrorism domain, such as Russia's war in Ukraine, rising threats posed by the CCP, and other priorities. Lastly, we wanted to highlight a lesser-known element of our counterterrorism response, which is our partnership with the Federal Park Service. For years, the Federal Park Service has allowed the NYPD to house our counterterrorism unit, aviation division, special operations division, and emergency services unit at Floyd Bennett Field. Grouping these units together in one location allows us to properly train for and rapidly respond to emergency situations where every second counts. Our lease recently expired, and we've been working collaboratively with the Parks Department to extend it. No agreement has yet been reached, and there is simply no other place in New York City that can provide the same space and access. We appreciate the support that several of you and your colleagues have provided in helping broker an agreement that would allow us to maintain our footprint there. Thank you again for the opportunity to testify today, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Deputy Commissioner Weiner. I now recognize Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this committee for giving us the opportunity to speak here today. The opportunity to give our victims a voice, and the opportunity to let law enforcement and all first responders know there are still people that are out there in government that support us in our battles every day. I am going to start my 41st year this January, and I too am a first responder down at Ground Zero. I woke up that morning, my father-in-law, retired FDNY, was standing there watching my 3 kids. They were newly born triplets in their bouncies. And he was watching the TV, staring in silence. I walked down, I'm putting my tie on, and he says, something bad happened. And he